9 creepy mysterious disappearances of multiple people. Disappearances make for some of the world's most fascinating unsolved mysteries, as it's always baffling when people go missing and no trace of them is ever found. However, it's even more baffling when multiple people manage to go missing at the same time. In some of these cases, it seems like abduction is the most likely scenario, but you'd think that successfully abducting more than one person would be an insanely difficult task. In other cases, it is nearly impossible to dream up a concrete theory about what happened to these people. 1. The Indiana Dunes women. On a shimmering Saturday 46 summers ago, 3 young women in bathing suits left their belongings on a crowded beach, and climbed aboard a small motorboat on Lake Michigan an hour southeast of Chicago. It was noon on July 2, 1966, at Indiana Dunes State Park. A couple whose beach blanket was beside the women's watched the boat glide away, then waited all day for them to return. They didn't know the women but thought it was odd that they would leave purses unattended on a day when the park was packed with 9,000 holiday sunbathers. As they left at dusk, the couple pointed out the abandoned blanket to a ranger. They said the women left on a boat operated by a tan young man with a mop of coal-colored curls. The ranger bundled up the sandy possessions and stored them. 18 hours later, on July 4th, Park Superintendent Bill Svitek took a call from a Chicago man inquiring about his daughter, Patty Blau, 19. She had not been heard from since leaving home for Indiana Dunes with 2 friends Saturday morning. Svitek opened the blanket bundle and found Blau's wallet, keys and clothing. He also found clothes and purses belonging to Blau's companions, Renee Brull, 19, and Ann Miller, 21. Miller's 1955 Buick was in the parking lot, one of 2,200 cars that had entered the park that busy Saturday. Svitek assured Harold Blau that his daughter would turn up, that she'd probably spent a long weekend partying with a swarthy sailor. An investigation began belatedly. Scuba teams scoured the lake, and searchers on foot and horseback combed the sprawling, wooded park situated on Indiana's 45-mile-long coastline. But no sign of the young women ever was found, and their fate is one of the enduring crime mysteries of the Midwest. The case gnaws at Dick Wiley, a reporter, photographer who chased crime in Northwest Indiana for the Gary Post-Tribune and the Chicago Sun-Times during the 1950s and 60s. He was the first newsman at the park that July 4th. Jeff Brull, L., and Harold Blau, R., examined the belongings of their loved ones. 3 years later, he quit the news and went into law enforcement in Florida. But his mind has never been far from Indiana Dunes. I've never been able to forget it, Wiley told the Justice story. I can't stand to think of 3 young girls just thrown to the wind, like their lives didn't matter. I've always wanted justice. Now 78 and long retired, he continues to chronicle the case from his home near Fort Myers. He has interviewed more people, witnesses, informants and the woman's kin, than the police have. His archive includes stacks of confidential police files and countless pages of notes, all boiled down into a 120,000-word manuscript containing his theories about the fate of the women. Wiley believes dark secrets lie at the heart of the mystery. Blau, Brull and Miller, friends from the Chicago suburbs, were drawn together by their love of horses. They rode and worked at the same stable, and Blau owned a thoroughbred racehorse. The women often met at a tavern in Hodgkins, Ill. Wiley suspects the events leading to their disappearance began there. Blau and Miller were single, and Wiley said they fell for married men at the tavern. Both got pregnant. The married Brull had problems of her own. In the purse she left on the beach, police found a letter she wrote, but didn't mail, to her husband, Jeff. She said she wanted a divorce. Little of these backstreet details appeared in the press, which in that era used more discretion about personal peccadillos. Yet those details might have helped smoke out clues. Wiley said the investigation was fragmented, with a cop in Blau's hometown of Westchester, Ill., leading the background investigation while a single Indiana state detective shouldered the probe at the park. Today, there would be a task force assigned to investigate, he said. Back then, it was 2 guys who never once met. Wiley said his own long investigation points to the pregnancies as a key to the case. Abortion was illegal in Illinois in 1966, 7 years before Roe v. Wade. Some Chicago women who found themselves in trouble visited a house just across the state border in Gary, where a husband and wife team, Helen and Frank Largo, performed backroom abortions. Wiley has linked the Largos, now dead, to a floating abortion mill that operated on a houseboat offshore in Lake Michigan. He believes Miller and Blau had arranged abortions on that boat on July 2nd, and they were ferried there by a young relative of the Largos. I believe the women got to the houseboat, but something went wrong with one of the procedures, Wiley said. They might have lost one girl, and they did away with the other two because they couldn't leave witnesses. The women left their belongings on the beach because they expected to be back in 90 minutes, Wiley said. The case may not be completely solvable at this point, Wiley said, unless a body turns up. But he hasn't given up. He spoke frequently over the years with the late Harold Blau, Patty's father. I made a promise to him that I would investigate this case until the day I die, Wiley said. I intend to keep it. 2. The Jamison family. Bobby and Sherilyn Jamison, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison, went missing in the Red Oak Mountain area of southeast Oklahoma in October 2009. Over 100 people were enlisted to search for the Jamison family, but no sign of them was found until November 2013, when the skeletal remains of 2 adults and a child were found in the woods, face down and side by side, roughly 3 miles from where their vehicle had been abandoned. It wasn't until July 2014 that these remains were positively identified as the Jamison family, though a cause of death was never determined. Rather than provide closure to the Jamisons' friends and family, it just raised questions as to what really happened to them. The Jamisons lived in Eufaula, Oklahoma, about 30 miles away from where they were found in the isolated mountain range. Red Oak is home to just over 500 people, and the Jamisons were interested in purchasing a 40-acre plot of land, although Sherilyn's son from a previous relationship, Colton, saw his mother just weeks before she went missing and never mentioned plans to move. When their truck was found in 2009, there was no sign of distress or a struggle, and the vehicle had not crashed. Inside the car were Bobby and Sherilyn's wallets, IDs, mobile phones, a GPS, maps, and $32,000 in cash. More disturbingly, the family dog Maisie was also in the car, malnourished from not having eaten in a week. The dog survived, and went to live with Bobby's mother. Theories surrounding what happened to the Jamison family have swirled since the disappearance, but nothing has ever been substantiated. One theory suggests that it was a murder-suicide. Both adults had suffered from depression, Sherilyn most recently after the death of her sister. A spiteful, 11-page letter written to Bobby from Sherilyn was found in the abandoned truck, and Sherilyn's pistol was missing. Another theory points to Bobby's father, Bob Jamison Sr. Bobby had a contemptuous relationship with his father, stemming from the profit of a gas station that was supposed to be split between father and son when it sold. Bobby ended up suing his father. His mother, Starlet, claims her ex-husband threatened the family. Police decided it was not a credible theory, despite rumors of Bob Sr.'s alleged ties to the Mexican mafia. He died 2 months after his son went missing. Drugs were also thought to be part of the equation. Red Oak is known for producing crystal meth, and Sherilyn and Bobby both looked emaciated in the weeks before their disappearance. Security video of the two outside their house the day they left for the mountains shows them moving in a trance-like state, and the huge amount of cash in their truck made this a credible theory. Even Sherilyn's best friend, Nikki Schnold, thought that it is possible the Jamisons were possibly involved in a one-off meth deal because they were experiencing some money troubles at the time. But both Sherilyn's mother Connie and Bobby's mother Starla do not believe their kids were involved in drugs, and police found no evidence of illicit substances in the Jamison home or truck. The most interesting theory behind the death of the Jamison family has to do with cults, witchcraft, and evil spirits. During the initial investigation, before the bodies were found, the family's pastor Gary Brandon told police the Jamisons had been involved in spiritual warfare. Both Bobby and Sherilyn claimed to have seen spirits in their house, belonging to a family who died long ago. Dr. Madison claimed to speak to spirit of a child who died in the house. Bobby asks his pastor for special bullets to shoot the spirits with, and claimed he consulted a satanic Bible to exorcise the property. Nikki admits both she and Sherilyn were interested in witches, and both had bought witches' Bibles as a joke, which the police found when searching the Jamison property. Despite joking about witches, Nikki felt the Jamison house was haunted. Once I was in the living room and this sort of gray mist ascended down the stairs. It really scared me, Nikki told the Daily Mail. She also said that Sherilyn told her her gentle husband Bobby would come towards her with eyes completely dead and black, like he was possessed. Nikki doesn't believe witchcraft was behind her friend's death, but Shrillin may have been a bigger believer than Nikki. She would leave notes around the house that would say things like "Get out, Satan," and was researching whether the house was built on a Native American burial ground. Unlike Nikki, Connie Koken, Shrillin's mother, believes her family fell victim to witchcraft of a religious cult. Connie claims that that portion of Oklahoma is known for harboring cults and stuff like that, and was told that Shrillin was on a cult's hit list around the time of her disappearance. Connie doesn't offer the name of the cult, or any other details. The trail in the Jamison case is now cold. Israel Beecham, the sheriff at the time of the disappearance, quit the force in 2011, and moved overseas. According to Nikki, he couldn't stand the guilt of not being able to find Madison's killer. Pastor Gary Brandon also left the area shortly after the Jamison disappearance, and has not spoken to anyone about the case. Even though the Jamisons' remains were found and put to rest, not knowing what happened has caused torment to the surviving friends and family that will probably never end. Friends. 3. Loria Bible and Ashley Freeman. Every 6 months Laureen Bible reminds people of a 17-year-old mystery she'll never forget. She calls it stirring the pot, and if she didn't do it, she wouldn't be able to live with herself. Bible lost her daughter, Loria Jaylene Bible, then 16, after a fire destroyed the home of Loria's best friend Ashley Renee Freeman on December 30, 1999. Loria was spending the night for Ashley's 16th birthday. Although Freeman's parents' bodies were located in the Welch home's charred remains, Ashley and Loria were nowhere to be found. For me, I decided early on that I was going to find my child, or I was going to do everything I physically can to do that, Bible said. So Laureen Bible keeps stirring, hoping one day someone will talk and she'll find her daughter. As Special Agent Tammy Ferrari and Investigator Gary Stansel know, the more people are talking either in the media or in their personal lives, the more tips come into law enforcement, and the more likely the missing person will be found. This biggest factor determining whether a case becomes cold is the frequency of tips or leads coming in for investigators to follow, said Ferrari, who for 4 years has been working the case of the missing Welch girls with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. The National Institute of Justice defines cold cases as those whose leads have been exhausted. Ashley and Loria, now women, if they're still alive, are among 85 listed missing from Oklahoma on the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children list. In 2015, there were 460,699 entries for missing children in the FBI's National Crime Information Center. However, that number may not be the best indicator of how many children are actually missing, as it counts every report of a missing child, including if the same child runs away multiple times. Many missing children also are never reported to authorities, according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. After 17 years, Ashley and Loria's case is considered cold, though that status doesn't necessarily change how law enforcement investigates a case, Ferrari said. After receiving the designation, the biggest difference is investigators may not work on the case daily. For instance, she said, if she's assigned a recent homicide case, she'll work to solve that case and follow up on tips or leads from her cold cases as time allows. It's not something we try to let sit around. The cold cases are the ones we definitely want to solve, Ferrari said. She's noticed that, for whatever reason, when a cold case is rehashed in the media, she begins to receive new tips. About a year after Laureen Bible began pot stirring on her Facebook page, both Ferrari and Stansel, an investigator with the district attorney's office for Craig, Mays and Rogers counties, said Ashley and Loria's case is more active than it's been in years. I would say that I'm probably more encouraged now than I was at the very beginning of this case, said Stansel, who's been working the case since 2011. Over the past year, investigators have done a few interviews, at least one inside a prison. Another interview is planned in the coming months. They've also hypnotized a possible witness to get information the person couldn't consciously recall, Ferrari said. In early 2016, the two investigators searched an abandoned well at a property in Kansas formerly owned by convicted murderer Charlie Curter. All they found was an old bucket. When the well thing didn't pan out, we said, okay, that's one less thing we have to do. That's one less thing we have to look for, Stansel said. Both investigators think there are people who know about the case but are too afraid to come forward, perhaps because they fear retribution. And although the anniversary normally provides investigators with new leads to follow, Bible admitted she doesn't like the winter. It brings up questions about her daughter's December disappearance she'd rather not dwell on. Was she cold? Was she hungry? Did she have enough clothes? Then you even get to the part, what would they have done with her? Bible said, she wonders the type of person Gloria would have grown up to become. Would she have been married? Would she have kids? What would she be doing right now? As far as Bible sees it, every bit of information, no matter how marginal it may seem, is one piece of a puzzle investigators didn't have before, and it might be the link that finally brings her and her family closure. Eventually you can put a puzzle together, and it's solved, she said. Both investigators ask anyone with any information about the case to contact them, even if they've previously provided a statement. In the past, some people have thought investigators had the information they'd provided but found out the information wasn't in the right hands, Stansel said. Bible put it this way, I just ask if there's somebody out there, that they pick up the phone and they call. 4. The Fandel children. Scott and his younger sister, Amy, were last seen during the evening hours of September 4, 1978. They had been at Good Time Charlie's, a bar, restaurant in Sterling, Alaska until approximately 10 p.m. that night with their mother, Margaret, and a visiting aunt, Margaret's sister Kathy Skonfelder. The women brought Scott and Amy back to their cabin at that time and then returned to the bar by themselves. The cabin the Fandels lived in had 2 bedrooms and was located in a rural, heavily wooded area off Scout Lake Road, half a mile from Sterling Highway, and south of Sterling. It had a single bright street light out front. The front door lock did not work. The cabin burned down several years after the Fandel children's disappearances. Scott and Amy visited their next-door neighbors, the Lupton family, after their mother and aunt dropped them off. They were very close to the Lupton children and walked with them to school each day. After playing with the Luptons, they went home again. A neighbor passing by at 11:45 p.m. noticed lights on in the Fandels' cabin. Margaret and Kathy arrived back home between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. on September 5, 1978 to find the lights out. This is unusual. Scott and Amy were afraid of the dark and usually left the lights on at night. A package of macaroni and an open can of tomatoes sat on the kitchen counter, and a pot of water was boiling on the stove. It appeared as if Scott had been interrupted in the process of preparing a macaroni snack, which he liked to eat before bed. Assuming that the children were sleeping at the Lupton's house, Margaret and Kathy retired for the night. Margaret left for work at approximately 8:30 a.m. that morning. Kathy awoke at 12 p.m. and assumed Scott and Amy were at school for the day. Margaret tried to call Amy at school that morning and was told the child hadn't arrived. She became worried, but her boss would not let her leave work. The Lupton children arrived at the Fandels' home after school and inquired as to Scott and Amy's whereabouts. Kathy learned that neither child had attended classes that day, nor had they spent the night at the neighbor's house. She called Margaret, who immediately summoned the police. Scott and Amy have never been seen again. Bullet casings were later found outside the cabin. It is unknown if they have anything to do with Scott and Amy's disappearances. Scott's motorcycle, a Yamaha YZ80 which was worth over $3,000 and said to be his most prized possession, was left behind. Margaret moved to Illinois after her children's disappearances. Scott's biological father also lives in Illinois. The children's maternal uncle, Terry Skonfelder, believes Amy's father, Roger D. Fandel, may be involved in her and her brother's disappearances. Roger left Margaret and the children in January 1978, 9 months prior to Scott and Amy's disappearances, and moved to Arizona. Margaret tried to reach him immediately after Scott and Amy vanished but could not, although his relatives whom she spoke to said he did not know the children's whereabouts. Shortly after their abductions, Roger flew to Alaska to assist in the search for them. He is not Scott's biological father, but had been playing that role since Scott was 2 years old and the two of them were very close. Years after the children's disappearances, a woman who had been Roger's girlfriend in 1978, allegedly asked for $5,000 from Roger's uncle in exchange for her telling him the children's fates. Roger has not been charged in connection with Scott and Amy's apparent abductions, however, and neither has anyone else. Investigators considered him a suspect in the cases for many years, but no longer believe he was involved. Terry believes Amy is alive and living in Anchorage, Alaska, Lompoc, California, or Drummond, Montana, but that Scott was killed shortly after being abducted. No evidence has been found to support any theory. Scott was in the 8th grade at the time of his disappearance and was an average student. He is described as streetwise, a prankster and very protective of his sister. Amy and Scott's cases remain unsolved. 5. The McStay family. Detective Troy Dugal has fielded hundreds of leads since entering the home of Joseph and Summer McStay a year ago to find rotten eggs on the kitchen counter and 2 cereal bowls full of popcorn on the living room futon. He believes the McStays went to Mexico with their 2 young boys, but the evidence that fills 4 large binders in his office cubicle yields no answers. I absolutely know their financials and their friends better than I know my own financials and my wife's friends, says Dugal, 49, a homicide investigator for the last 3 of his 15 years with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. Friday marked 1 year since the McStays disappeared from their home in Fallbrook, a small town north of San Diego known for its avocado orchards, and Dugal says he is no closer to cracking the case than he was the day that Joseph's brother called to report the family was missing. 4 days after the family vanished, their white Isuzu Trooper was parked at a San Diego shopping mall, just steps from Tijuana, Mexico. A dark surveillance video shows 4 people walking across the border that night, possibly the McStays. What troubles the detective most is that he has no account of the 4 days before they crossed the border. Were they staying with friends? Were they at a hotel? I think it's likely that something bad has happened, says Dugal, who is on a second career after serving in the Navy. Joseph, who was 40 when he disappeared, was a mild-mannered surfer who made friends easily. He ran a business from home designing and installing water fountains. He kept promises and paid bills on time. In his spare time, he played soccer and hung out with buddies. He was close to a teenage son from a previous marriage who lives in the San Diego area. Summer, who was 43 when she vanished, was more reserved. An avid shopper, she frequented Ross Dress for Less and had a penchant for fur and UGG footwear. She was a devoted stay-at-home mom to Gianni, who was 4, and Joseph Mateo, 3. She gave birth at home and wanted them homeschooled. Born Lisa Virginia Aranda, Summer has taken several names during her life, which Dugal chalks up to an eccentric personality. Her sister, Tracy Russell, told him that Summer once suggested she change her name to Autumn. Summer admired Italians, which may explain why she once took the surname Martelli. Dugal hasn't found anyone in her life with the name. Summer did not care for her Hispanic heritage, Dugal said. Therefore, she assumed identities in the things she liked. The couple dated a while and married in 2007. They left a small duplex in San Clemente, south of Los Angeles, after their boys were born and bought a home in Fallbrook. They moved in over Thanksgiving weekend in 2009, and were unpacked when they vanished barely 2 months later. Dugal found no signs of forced injury when he arrived at their home February 15, the day that Michael McStay called to report his brother missing. A computer search piqued the detective's interest. Summer emailed a seller on Craigslist about Rosetta Stone software to learn Spanish and asked that it be delivered to Joseph at a soccer game. Joseph's friends remember seeing him shake hands with 2 men at a game January 29, the day of the arranged sale. Internet searches on January 27 included queries on passport requirements for travel to Mexico and whether there was an age requirement for entering the country. On February 4, the day of the disappearance, Summer made her last cell phone call at 2:11 p.m. to a homeopathic medicine company, and an employee remembered it well. It came minutes after an internet search for the word anger on the company website. Summer was adamant that she wanted to purchase a medication called anger, Dugal said. They said, "Ma'am, it doesn't exist." A neighbor's surveillance tape shows the bottom of what looked like the McStay's Isuzu Trooper passing at 7:47 p.m. Joseph's last cell phone call came at 8:28 p.m. to an employee, Charles Merritt, to follow up on a meeting earlier that day. Merritt told the detective that Joseph spoke calmly and strictly about business. Dugal thinks the family left the home alone. "I believe something occurred within those 4 walls between the 4 family's members that made them leave in a hurry," he said. "It may have been good, it may have been bad, I don't know." Dugal opened the back of the Isuzu at a towing yard and found a Pottery Barn Kids refrigerator and sink for a playhouse, with children's videos like Franklin Goes to School that were purchased at Ross Dress for Less. The SUV was towed from the lot with a 2-hour parking limit. Employees remembered keeping tabs on it. Dugal says the border crossing surveillance tape appears to show the McStays. The woman is wearing fur and UGG boots. The 2 children and man wear hats. as Joseph and his sons often did. The FBI assures Dougal that the McStays are not living under witness protection. Neither Joseph nor Summer had criminal records or signs of financial problems. Dougal believes the family would have sent word home by now if they were safe. "We're a year into this," he said. "I want to find the family." 6. The mystery of the Sarah Jo. Marine biologist John Naughton Jr. was looking for green turtles in the Marshall Islands recently, when he found something on a remote atoll that was believed to be lost forever. It was the Sarah Jo, a small fiberglass motorboat that disappeared nearly 10 years ago during a Hawaiian Islands storm with 5 men on board, including a 27-year-old former high school football star from Granada Hills. And wedged into a pile of stones near the battered boat was a driftwood cross and a partial set of teeth. Beneath the rocks were the remains of Scott Murman, the former Monroe High School running back who had moved to Maui from Granada Hills in the mid-1970s. The identification was made from dental and medical records after Naughton, of the National Marine Fisheries Service, recognized the 16.5-foot craft as the same one he helped search for in 1979, and contacted the U.S. Coast Guard. No trace of the other 4 men was found on the atoll, which is about 2,300 miles southwest of Hawaii. On Saturday, the Little Brown Church in Studio City was draped with garlands of flowers from Hawaii. About 100 people gathered there to eulogize Mormon, who was remembered as a talented athlete, musician and woodworker, and as a free spirit who realized his dream of living in the Pacific Highlands and across the ocean. On Maui, residents of the small town of Hana, where Mormon and the others lived, planned to bury the Sarah Jo and plant 5 fir trees on a peninsula in memory of the men who disappeared. The discovery of Mormon's remains has reopened the question of what happened after the 5 set out on a day-long fishing expedition on February 11, 1979. "I used to worry so much when it rained that Scott was wet and cold," said his mother, Patricia Mormon, 62. "I'm relieved to know he's not lost in the ocean someplace, but I hurt so much for the other families." The men Mormon, Ralph Maliakini, 27, Pat Wosnor, 26, Benny Kalama, 38, and Peter Hanchett, 31 embarked on the trip to take advantage of a day of good weather after a period of squalls, said Jack Mormon, 61, Scott Mormon's father. But by afternoon the sky had darkened, and winds whipped the water into a flurry of whitecaps, according to weather reports. Other boats scurried in when the weather worsened, but the Sarah Jo never returned, Jack Mormon said. A 5-day search by the U.S. Coast Guard proved fruitless, as did a month-long search financed by friends and relatives of the missing men. Nothing more was learned until Naughton found the boat September 9. Medical examiners at the U.S. Army Central Identification Laboratory in Hawaii could not determine when Mormon died or the cause of his death, said Lieutenant Col. Tom Boyd, a spokesman for the lab. But many of Mormon's relatives and friends believed he reached the island alive and swam to shore, only to die from lack of water. They are angry that the U.S. Coast Guard stopped searching for the missing men 5 days after they disappeared. "Scott was a competitor, and I'm positive he battled for his life to the end," said Harry Fromm, his former football coach. An investigation has begun in the Republic of the Marshall Islands to find out who buried Murman, said Scott Chun of Honolulu, a cousin of one of the missing men. "All this is like the Twilight Zone," said Mormon's sister, Julie, 34. "We may never have any answers, but then again, we didn't ever really think we'd know this much." 7. The Fort Worth 3. Rachel set out for an afternoon of Christmas shopping at the Seminary South Shopping Center, now known as the Fort Worth Town Center, on December 23, 1974. She was in high school at the time, but had been married to Thomas Trelica for 6 months. Rachel asked her friend Lisa Renee Wilson to accompany her to the mall. Lisa agreed. The two girls allowed Julianne Mosley, a neighborhood child and friend of Lisa's family, to tag along with them. Rachel was not familiar with Julie before this day. The 3 girls departed before 12 p.m. and arrived at the Army Navy store to retrieve Christmas presents that were on layaway. They then headed to the Seminary South Shopping Center, parking the Trelica's Oldsmobile on the upper parking level near Sears. Witnesses informed authorities that they had seen the 3 girls inside the mall during the day. Authorities believe that they returned to the car at some point during the afternoon, but what happened to them afterwards remains a mystery. The Oldsmobile was discovered locked in the lot with a presence still inside when the vehicle was located at approximately 6 p.m. that evening. There was no sign of the girls. One witness claimed she observed the three girls being hustled into a pickup truck by unidentified men the day they vanished. Another witness came forward in 1981, 7 years following their disappearances, and stated he saw an unidentified male forcing a girl into a van in the mall's lot. When the witness approached them, the man told him it was a family dispute, and asked him to stay out of it. Neither of these stories has been verified by authorities. Police initially assumed that the girls had run away of their own volition. Their families, however, insisted otherwise. A letter arrived at the Chulukas' residence on the morning of December 24, 1974. The day after the girls were last seen. It was addressed to Thomas A. Chuluka and the name Rachel was written in the upper left corner of the envelope. The letter stated, "I know I'm going to catch it, but we just had to get away. We're going to Houston, Texas. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears. Sick, upper lot. Love, Rachel." The letter had been written on a sheet of paper that was wider than the envelope in what was termed a childish scrawl. The original loop for the letter L in Rachel's name was short and appeared to be a lowercase e. The letter writer had gone over it to make it appear more like a lowercase l. Rachel's mother and her husband never believed she was the letter's author. Rachel called her husband Tommy and the address clearly stated Thomas A. Chuluka, a formality which Rachel rarely bothered using. In addition, there was no city name on the postmark, only a blurry postal service number, 76,083. The 3 appears to be printed backwards, leading one private investigator to believe that the last 2 numbers of the postmark were hand-loaded in a stamp. If the stamp were indeed dirt and the final 2 numbers are supposed to be 38, the letter was stamped in Ellisville, Texas. If the numbers were 88, the letter was postmarked from Weatherford, Texas. Handwriting experts' tests on the letter have been inconclusive as to date. The author of the letter remains unknown. Thomas retrieved the letter out of their mailbox himself and stated that he thought it was sealed. The 10-cent stamp on the letter had been canceled the morning it arrived at their residence, December 24, 1974. Rachel's sister Deborah claims that their childhoods had been unhappy, and that she and Rachel had been frightened of their father, who is since deceased. Deborah was once engaged to Thomas Chuluka before his marriage to Rachel, but she now says the relationship was not serious. Rachel began seeing him afterwards and the two were married in 1974. Rachel then moved out of the Arnold family home and lived with Thomas. Deborah had been arguing with her then boyfriend at the time Rachel and the girls disappeared and was temporarily living with Rachel and Thomas in December 1974. Both Deborah and Thomas maintained that their romantic relationship was over by that time and it was not uncomfortable having all 3 of them living in the same quarters. Rachel asked Deborah to accompany her on the shopping trip on December 23, but Deborah decided to stay in bed instead. Deborah was also in the Chuluka home the following day when Thomas recovered the strange letter. Some members of the Julie, Lisa and Arnold families believe that Deborah knows more about the 3 girls' disappearances than she has maintained. They sent her a letter after her interview with Mary Rogers of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram newspaper in Texas in January 2000. The family's letter pleaded for Deborah to divulge all the details she may know concerning the girls' whereabouts and to fully cooperate with the Fort Worth Police Department and the FBI investigations. Deborah continues to state that she knows nothing more about the case and has nothing to hide. Deborah does admit that her brother Rusty Arnold believes she knows about the case and that she wrote the letter to Thomas, not Rachel. Deborah denies this accusation and said in the January 2000 interview with the Star-Telegram that she believes her sister may have been forced into slavery. Through the years, the families of the 3 missing girls have struggled to deal with claims that the girls' bodies were in different places throughout Texas. None of these claims have panned out. The families hired John Swaim, a private investigator, in 1975, after frustrations with the police investigation. Swaim committed suicide in 1979, and his records were destroyed, but it is unclear if he uncovered any legitimate information concerning the case. Rachel's family members are now divided due to differing opinions concerning the circumstances of the disappearances. Her brother Rusty located private investigator Dan James in 1999, a man who maintains he has never received any financial compensation for his work on the case. James and Rusty believe witness reports that Rachel and Lisa were seen alive in the initial days following their 1974 disappearance at stores and a gas station. They now believe that both Lisa and Julie are deceased. but that Rachel is alive and being kept from visiting the Fort Worth area by persons unnamed. James does claim that several credible witnesses reported seeing Rachel in the Fort Worth area during the Christmas holidays as recently as 1998. However, James and Rusty also believe that the unidentified persons are maintaining efforts to keep Rachel cloistered away. They refuse to detail their evidence, if any, supporting these claims. It is worth noting that James began offering a $25,000 reward to any person whose information about the case leads to the arrest and conviction of the responsible party, or parties, in December 1999. James is also one of the sponsors of the website MissingTrio.com, a site that offers information and news updates on the missing girls case. In April 2001, X's NBC5 in Texas reported that a witness came forward and told Fort Worth police investigators that he saw the three girls inside a pickup truck with a young male security guard from Seminary South Shopping Center at approximately 11:30 p.m. on the evening of their disappearance. The witness stated that the girls seemed relaxed and were in the vehicle willingly. The witness said he contacted the authorities a few days following the girls' disappearance, but that investigators failed to follow through with his lead until April 2001. Authorities told reporters that they located the security guard who was identified by the witness, but that the man denied the girls were in his truck on the evening of December 23, 1974. Detectives went on to state that they are actively looking at 5 suspects and also utilizing DNA testing in their investigation. Police officials have said that they now believe the girls left the mall with an individual that they trusted and were harmed afterwards. 8. The Lyon sisters. Catherine departed from her family's residence on Pliers Mill Road in Kensington, Maryland on March 25, 1975 with her older sister Sheila Lyon between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m. The girls were walking to the Wheaton Plaza Shopping Center in Wheaton, Maryland, which was approximately 1/2 mile from their home and located on the corner of University Boulevard and Veers Mills Road. It was the first day of Easter vacation from school and Catherine and Sheila wanted to see the Easter exhibits at the mall, as well as have a pizza lunch at the Orange Bowl restaurant. A neighborhood child saw the girls outside the restaurant at approximately 1 p.m. He told investigators that the sisters were speaking to an unidentified middle-aged man, 50 to 60 years old, who was wearing a brown suit. The man was carrying a briefcase with a tape recorder inside. There were also other children around who were speaking into a microphone he was holding. 2 composite sketches of the man were created, and several individuals recognized him. They reported seeing him at the Marlow Heights Shopping Center and the Iverson Mall both in Prince George's County, Maryland. He approached several young girls and asked them to read an answering machine message typed on an index card into his handheld microphone. He has never been identified. Later, investigators concluded the individual had not been involved in the girls' disappearances. The girls' 15-year-old brother saw them inside the Orange Bowl restaurant eating pizza together at approximately 2 p.m. the day they vanished. A friend stated that the girls were walking westward down Drum Avenue near Devon Street between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m. This would have been one of the most direct routes to their home on Pliers Mill Road from the mall and was the final confirmed sighting of the sisters. Their mother had instructed Sheila and Catherine to return to the residence by 4 p.m. When they did not arrive by 7 p.m. authorities were summoned and an extensive search was conducted. No evidence of the Lyon sisters' whereabouts could be located. Several extortion-type phone calls were made to the Lyon family in the weeks following the girls' disappearances. The most serious call came from an unidentified male on April 4, 1975. The individual demanded that their father leave a briefcase with $10,000 inside an Annapolis, Maryland courthouse restroom. The money was left as per the instructions but was never claimed. The caller later maintained that police had surrounded the courthouse and he could not retrieve the ransom. Before the money would be offered to the man again, he was required to show evidence of the Lyon sisters in his custody. The caller said he would be in touch with the family, but never called back. A witness in Manassas, Virginia reported seeing 2 girls resembling Sheila and Catherine in the rear of a beige 1968 Ford station wagon on April 7, 1975. The witness stated that the girls were observed bound and gagged in the vehicle at approximately 7:30 a.m. that day. The driver of the station wagon resembled the man seen questioning children at the Orange Bowl restaurant the day the sisters vanished. When the driver spotted the witness tailing him, He ran a red light and sped west on Route 234 towards Interstate 66 in Virginia. The station wagon had Maryland license plates with the possible combination DMT6. The last two numbers are unknown due to the bending of the car's plate. The known combination was issued in Cumberland, Hagerstown and Baltimore, Maryland at the time. A search for matching plate numbers failed to produce any information. This witness's report was at first treated as credible, but was later deemed questionable by police. In 2014, authorities named Lloyd Lee Michael Welch Jr. and Richard Allen Welch, Sr. as the prime suspects in the sisters' cases. Lloyd, who is also known as Michael Lee Welch, is Richard's nephew. He was 18 years old in 1975. Photos of the men, both of whom are still alive, are posted below this case summary. Lloyd has a record numerous criminal offenses, including sex offenses against young girls in South Carolina, Virginia and Delaware. Since 1997, he's been serving a 30-year sentence in a Delaware prison. He traveled throughout the United States from the 1970s to the 1990s and worked for a traveling carnival. He was at the Wheaton Plaza shopping center the day Catherine and Sheila went missing, and was observed watching them. Investigators believe Richard worked as a security guard at the area. Lloyd told authorities he'd left the mall with Catherine and Sheila the day of their disappearances, and later saw his uncle sexually assaulting one of them. He said he left the residence and never saw either of the children again. Investigators believe the girls' remains may be buried on Taylor's Mountain about 200 miles from their home. Richard apparently owned property there in the 1970s, and so did his sister. A grand jury investigation into the children's disappearances began in 2014. Richard's wife testified, and authorities believe she lied on the stand. She was subsequently charged with perjury. In July 2015, a grand jury indicted Lloyd for first-degree felony murder in Sheila and Catherine's cases. The felony was abduction with intent to defile. He faces 20 years to life in prison, or possibly the death penalty, if convicted. Authorities stated there was a conspiracy involved in the Lyon sisters' presumed deaths and it was possible more arrests would be made and indictments issued. Active searches for the Lyon sisters' bodies commenced in 2014. Foul play is suspected in their cases due to the circumstances involved. 9. The Springfield 3. Cheryl and her daughter, Suzanne Streeter, resided in the 1700 block of East Elmer Street in Springfield, Missouri in 1992. Suzanne graduated from Kickapoo High School during the evening of June 6, 1992. She spent the early part of the evening having dinner at home with her mother. Suzanne and her friend Stacy McCall planned to spend the night in a hotel in Branson, Missouri. They decided to stay at another friend's home in Battlefield, Missouri instead. Suzanne called Cheryl at approximately 10:30 p.m. to discuss their plans. Cheryl telephoned a friend at approximately 11:15 p.m. that evening. She was painting a chest of drawers at the time and gave no indication that anything was amiss inside her residence. Suzanne and McCall returned to Cheryl's residence at approximately 2:15 a.m. on June 7 after deciding that their friend's home was too crowded. They planned to meet other friends at Whitewater Amusement Park in Branson later in the day. The girls drove their separate vehicles to Cheryl's house. Neither they nor Cheryl have been heard from again. Neighbors did not hear any suspicious activity near Cheryl's home during the overnight hours. One of the girls' friends phoned and visited Cheryl's residence several times during the day in an attempt to locate the three women. McCall's family alerted authorities about the disappearances during the evening of June 7. All of the women's personal belongings were discovered inside the house. Their vehicles were also parked at the home. Cheryl's bed appeared to have been slept in during the previous night. Her eyeglasses were beside her bed and a book had been turned over, indicating that Cheryl may have been interrupted while reading. The family's Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, was still inside the house and appeared to be anxious. All of Cheryl's personal belongings were untouched and the television was turned on. There was no sign of a struggle at the residence, but the porch light had been shattered. No additional physical evidence was discovered at the scene. Authorities now believe that the broken glass from the porch light may have provided clues about the disappearances. A friend of the girls swept the shards into the garbage, unaware that he was discarding possible evidence at the time. Investigators noted that Cheryl and Suzanne's cigarettes and lighters were still inside the house. The three women's purses were placed together on the stairs. The blinds in Suzanne's room were pulled apart, as if someone had been looking outside. Authorities later admitted that the crime scene had possibly been tainted by the 20 or so loved ones who visited Cheryl's house after their disappearances were reported. No one realized the seriousness of the situation until nearly 24 hours had passed. Officers left a note on Cheryl's door, asking her to call the police department and cancel the missing persons reports when she and the girls returned home. An extensive search of the surrounding areas produced no clues as to the women's whereabouts. Robert Craig Cox, a convicted robber serving time on unrelated charges in a Texas prison, was identified as a possible suspect in the case. Cox initially told investigators that he was not in the Springfield area on June 7, but later recanted his statement. Cox also told a journalist that he knew the women had been murdered and buried near Lovett's home, but he claimed that their remains would never be discovered. Authorities are uncertain if Cox was involved in the case or if he is seeking attention by issuing false statements. Cox has never been charged in connection with the women's disappearances. A witness reported observing a woman matching Suzanne's description driving an older model moss green Dodge van later during the day on June 7. The witness claimed that the woman appeared terrified as an unseen male voice told her, "Don't do anything stupid." The witness did not contact investigators with her account until several days had passed. Additional witnesses reported seeing the Dodge van in different areas of Springfield after the women's disappearances. A man told authorities that he saw the blonde female sitting in the driver's seat of a similar vehicle in the parking lot of a local grocery store. The individual said that he wrote the van's license plate number on a newspaper, as the vehicle seemed suspicious. The man threw the paper away before contacting investigators. Law enforcement officials agreed to hypnotize the man, but he was only able to provide the plate's first 3 digits. Authorities have been unable to determine if a van was involved in the women's cases. A photo of a similar vehicle is posted below this case summary. A server at George's Steakhouse, one of Cheryl's favorite Springfield restaurants, reported seeing the women in the establishment between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. on June 7. The employee claimed that Cheryl, Suzanne and McCall arrived and departed together. She said that Suzanne appeared to be intoxicated as the group left the restaurant and Cheryl was attempting to calm her down. Investigators have never confirmed the possible sighting and it is not clear if the women visited the eatery before their disappearances. Other witnesses reported hearing a woman's screams and the squeal of tires in eastern Greene County, Missouri during the early hours of June 7. Officials searched the area, but no evidence related to the case was located. A composite sketch of an unidentified transient man was released in the days preceding the disappearances. The individual was allegedly spotted near Cheryl and Suzanne's residence in early June 1992. Authorities do not know if the man was involved in the case. Cheryl's son and Suzanne's older brother, Bart Streeter, and one of Suzanne's former boyfriends were ruled out as suspects in the case early in the investigation. An anonymous caller phoned America's Most Wanted's hotline after the program profiled the women's case in late December 1992. The caller was disconnected before he could speak to Springfield investigators. Authorities believe that the person held vital information connected to the disappearances. Despite public pleas for assistance, the individual never contacted authorities again. Investigators searched an area of land in Webster County, Missouri in August 1993. Authorities refused to announce what was located at the site and if anything pertained to the disappearances. Investigators received a tip from 2 women in 2002, that led officials back to the same county for an additional search. The women said that 2 men were employed at the local concrete company that once owned the site near Marshfield, Missouri. The tipsters said that the individuals drove a van similar to the vehicle that may have been used in the missing women's cases. The informants claimed that the men departed Springfield shortly after Cheryl, Suzanne and McCall vanished. Investigators determined that 2 men did work at the company in 1992, but they were unable to identify the individuals or confirm that they drove a van. Cadaver dogs located 2 possible areas of interest at the site in late July 2002. Authorities cautioned that the dogs' indications did not prove human remains were buried in the area. Investigators also stated that it was unlikely the sites were related to the women's disappearances. Several officials charged the former chief of police of impeding their investigation into the case in the late 1990s. Others dispute that contention and said that little evidence was available in the case from its onset. One of the original investigators theorized that the women's assailants took cinnamon out of Cheryl's yard during the overnight hours of June 7 in an effort to gain access to the residence. The officer speculated that the attackers knocked on the door, pretending to have rescued the dog after he wandered away from the home. The investigator theorized that one of the women may have opened the door to retrieve Cinnamon and was overpowered by the assailants. Cheryl's background was investigated as other leads proved futile. She and Suzanne moved to the Springfield area in 1980. From Seattle, Washington, Cheryl divorced her first husband, Brent Streeter, shortly after Suzanne's birth. She told friends that Brent believed they should divorce and continue living together. His plan would allow Cheryl to qualify for welfare assistance. Cheryl decided to end the relationship instead. She moved into an apartment complex in Seattle and stayed home with Suzanne and Bart for 6 months after Suzanne's birth. Cheryl received free rent while performing repair work around the complex. Cheryl and Suzanne moved into their home on East Elmer Street in April 1992. 2 months before their disappearances. Cheryl's 1989 divorce from her second husband, Don Levitt, impacted her finances and she elected to relocate to the smaller residence with her daughter. Don's creditors began asking Cheryl to pay his debts after their divorce. She hired an attorney to locate him without success. Cheryl was employed at New Attitudes Hair Salon on West Sunshine Street in Springfield in 1992. She had 250 clients at the time of her disappearance and was considered a model employee. Her family members describe her as a private person who had a close relationship with Streeter in 1992. Their relatives had them both declared legally deceased in 1997, 5 years after their disappearances. A bench was dedicated to the woman in Victims Memorial Garden in Springfield's Phelps Grove Park the same year. Their cases remain unsolved.